Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new YouTube channel, Patrick Goes Wild, and you're tuned in to Wild and Live. I'm hoping that this is going out with sound. You know what? I'm going to double check because last time we did this, we didn't have any sound, and I can hear sound. We're streaming, we're live, we're good, which I'm very happy about. So just to kind of recap where we left off, we on our last conversation when we were going to speak to this person, we just had a previous episode where we're talking to Dan O'Neill, who's a filmmaker and adventurer, where he was talking about all of his adventures in Southeast Asia and also in Guyana. And that was great. So if you want to go and see any of that video or any other the other vlogs that we've put up so far, just once we've done with this episode, go back, have a look through the video list, and yeah, you can check out the videos that you want to and have a look at the ones that are coming up. Today, however, we are going to be joined by adventurer and marine scientist. She's here today to talk about her passion for creatures of the sea, from rays to coral reefs. Charlie Young, are you wild and live? Yeah, not too bad. This is actually our round two, our second attempt at this. Yeah, it's hopefully everything goes well. But I mean, the reason that the first thing that we were talking about last time was the fact that you had a really crazy cool story to share with us. But we wanted to start off by finding out what does it mean to be a marine scientist in this day and age. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, from what I've heard so far, it sounds like you've had so many wild adventures. What would be your most thrilling to date, would you say? Or the most exciting, the one that kind of stands out to you the most? Yeah. Oh. Like most people would probably swim in the opposite direction. You decide to go towards them. Mm. Disappeared. Yeah. Yeah, where have they gone? Where have they gone? You can't keep an eye on them. Sounds like I can't say that I've had a similar experience. Actually, I have, but behind a cage, like a sane person. So that was cage diving with great white sharks. And you're right, they kind of seem to appear and disappear out of the blue, and they are super fast. But moving from one of a fast moving marine animal to one of the slower marine animals, let's talk about your experience coming across. I think it's better if you tell this story. Essentially, you were having a stroll down the beach, and then it turned into a kind of massive rescue operation.
to lift her out and realized very quickly that she was far too heavy for me to do that. And it was just going to be completely impossible because she was really, really wedged. And yeah, we wrestled for about half an hour to try and get her out. And for ages, I didn't think we couldn't budge her. Two fully grown people. I'd been hitting the gym at that point, so
I mean, we can see you. I'm playing this with the video as you're talking right now, so we can see your guns.
My guns were
There,
really
Charlie.
big
Yeah.
and clunky. They were not helpful at all. I didn't help. It was George, my partner, who really sort of had the muscle to get her out. But we eventually, George came up with an idea of trying to lever her, and once we got that plank of wood, that's when we made progress and eventually managed to get her out, which, oh, I can't explain to you. I've never wanted to cry and sort of jump around for joy so much in a moment. It was the most thrilling thing I've ever done. I hope I never have to do it again, but really an experience to have lived through.
I think you said this earlier when we were having a conversation. The thing that came out of that experience for you, the positive, was that you realized how many people cared about the oceans and cared about the animals that inhabit the sea and the ocean. And that came about from the fact that your video did go viral, and
Oh,
and
it
it
did.
and that had a knock-on effect on you. What can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it was a very interesting experience. I've never had anything that's gone viral before, and so first of all, the positive messages were overwhelming. I'd say 95% of them were overwhelming, um, or nice, but there was this percentage that also were critical. And so, in the first instance, I felt very vulnerable because there were so many people sort of judging our actions, or
Mm.
sort of criticizing possibly what we had done. But it was after time and after I got over the initial sort of like hype of it all that I realized the impact that it had had. And I had people from all over the world messaging me saying, that was incredible. I've now gone and looked into this endangered animal more because they are endangered. I've contributed some money to this charity. I've done this, I've done that. So all of a sudden, it weirdly had brought awareness to an animal that people were aware of, but it highlighted it. It really brought it into the forefront of people's lives.
Yeah.
And that was an amazing feeling to not only feel like that we had, made people feel happy that we had saved this animal and shown them that, anyone can do amazing things, but it also, raised awareness for green turtles.
Yeah, it went on to have a big impact. Also, we can touch on this a bit later. I want to talk about some of the projects that you have got going on. Um, well, once we're out of this quarantine situation, that is. But yeah, so let's go back to experience in Oman and wrap up then. And I want to talk about your time in some of the other parts of the world. So why was that female turtle on the beach? Why and why and how had she got herself stuck into that massive crevice, like in between those boulders?
So basically, green sea turtles during the nesting season will come onto land to lay their eggs. And this turtle, what we could see from the tracks is that she had come up the beach, and unfortunately, in the center of the beach, there was this rocky outcrop. And what she had done is she had come up for what we call a laying attempt, and she had come across a couple of boulders and sort of veered off towards the left. And unfortunately, as she had tried to make it back to the sea,
Mm.
because she hadn't found anywhere to lay her eggs, she had unfortunately fallen down this crevice. And so she was basically there to do her normal instinctive thing, to lay the eggs, which she was full of. She was completely full of eggs when we were lifting her. We could feel them when we were lifting her out. And turtles will do this. They will come onto the beach multiple times at night to try and lay eggs, but they're not always successful in finding somewhere because, as you mentioned before, they're very, very slow on land, and it's a
Mm.
taxing thing for them. In the water, they're so agile, but on land, it's literally like watching a slug. Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, she was there to lay her eggs, but unfortunately had come a cropper really. She by getting onto this rocky part.
Yeah. And thankfully you were there to help uh, get her back into the ocean. Hopefully, she made it back onto to that beach to lay some more eggs. Interesting fact about sea turtles, certainly for olive ridleys, I think it's 1 in 1,000 hatchlings will make it to adulthood, which sounds like the most ridiculous odds for a young baby that's faced with
Hmm.
the what big wide world. But I suppose that is why they lay so many eggs, so
They
that
do.
they kind of flood the ocean with these beautiful cute hatchlings, and hopefully they'll eventually make it.
They do, and so they can lay up to about 100, over 180 eggs, per sort of laying that they do, and they can lay multiple times throughout a season. So you're right, the odds are not really in their favour, and not many survive through to adulthood.
You were part of a some of your work, sorry, took you to Saudi Arabia. You're working at the Reef Ecology Lab, and one of the animals you were studying there included one of your favorites, blue spotted rays. As their name suggests, they're covered in these blue spots. They almost kind of look like they're glowing. Do they use that for any particular reason? Do they use it for communication between each other?
It's basically to just say, I'm poisonous, don't eat me. I mean, they're not specifically poisonous. They have a venomous spine on their tail, but they basically want to try and ward off predators. So, like other animals in the animal kingdom that have these sort of jazzy colours, it's basically to say, you really don't want to eat me. I'm disgusting. I'm toxic. And so that's why blue spots are covered in these beautiful fluorescent blue. They're so blue dots, and they're just beautiful, beautiful creatures. And
How big do they get,
they
Charlie?
can be, I think, about 35 centimeters. Not very
Okay.
big at all, really. The biggest I've ever handled is probably this big.
Mm.
They're not as big as other ray species that you come across.
But still just as beautiful and potentially just as dangerous. Do you ever get scared handling animals that can potentially harm you?
Well, yes, but I was lucky that because I was assisting scientists who were leading this research, they were the ones that sort of handled the spine. But yes, you have to be careful because although I'm a firm believer that animals are not trying to, they're not against you, they don't deliberately want to hurt you, but you have to put yourself
Mm.
in the animal's shoes in that situation and think, okay, wow, there's this massive, huge animal that's handling me. I'm obviously going to die. They will protect themselves. But,
Yeah, for sure.
you have to be respectful of that. But yes, I've worked with other species in the past that have been venomous, and you have to be respectful of.
Mm.
But I guess it just adds a bit of thrill, a bit of.
Yeah, I guess it does. Makes it that much more exciting. One more question about the blue spotted rays, and then I want to move on. But what is it about these rays in particular that you find so special, and how does that relate to the research that you're doing at the time?
So, what I basically love them for a very, very silly reason, and this is because I feel like they look like silky pancakes, and when you hold them, they are so silky. And the way that they move, it's just like a pancake flying through the water, and that I just love them for that reason alone. It's,
That's brilliant, Charlie. I think that's the best answer we've had so far because they look like silky pancakes,
yeah, I
people.
mean, I just love them. I just think
Yeah.
they're so awesome in their physiology because they're a pancake with no arms. They have these pectoral fins, which they sort of use to, fly around, as I say. They have their mouth
Mm.
on the bottom of their disc, but they don't breathe through their mouth. They breathe through. They've got holes just behind their eyes where they draw in water, which then rushes over their gills, and that's how they breathe, which is a really cool adaptation. Um, just in general, I think they're super cool. But the reason they become important to me is because I was working with researchers, so Ashley McIver, this research as part of her master's thesis, and it's her passion really that has sort of rubbed off on me and why I've
Mm.
become, almost obsessed with them ever since. And I mean, she's such an expert, and through her, I've learned so much. So much of this I've learned through her. But
Yeah.
I guess I don't have a specific reason other than they
I like the silky pancake look. That's what got me. And they use those pectoral fins to flatten out pectoral fins to maneuver their food towards their mouth, and they are related to the shark family, which
yeah.
some people might find surprising. They're like which is appropriate that you call them pancakes. They're kind of like sharks. Yeah. So from pancake sharks, we're going to move on swiftly. What a segue! Another one of your research expeditions took you to the Coral Triangle, Charlie. So this region is defined roughly by the Philippines and Indonesia in the west, and the Solomon Islands in the east. So it's a vast expanse of water. What's so special about the Coral Triangle?
Well, it's the marine biodiversity hotspot of the oceans. It's like the jewel of all of our oceans.
Is that where they think that life first began?
Potentially. And the reason being is just because of how much biodiversity there is there. It's packed full. It's got, I think it's about seven, I've made a note here. It's about 75% of known coral species, 30% of all of the world's reef, and over 35% of reef fishes are all found in this region. And you've got everything from the coral communities also to, things like blue whales and dolphins.
Oh,
So
lovely
it's
whales.
just packed full of life. And the reason why scientists have thrown around this idea that it could be where marine life originates from is because when they go back in the sort of geological record and have looked at fossils, they found that even 20 million years ago, this area is got such a high level of biodiversity, and so they're thinking that it could have been where life sort of first began and has sort of populated other parts of our oceans.
Yeah.
There's no place like it. If you ever want to go and see an incredible,
Head to that part of the
yeah,
world
go there.
for incredible marine wildlife. That's I'll bear that in mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with last week we were talking about animal groups, and I wonder where I wanted to ask you about where coral would fit in.
Yeah.
Because coral is an invertebrate, but that it's kind of a trick question if you were to ask where coral would fit in. Do you want to tell us why?
Yes, because there's a lot of people who would think that corals are plants, but they're actually animals. And I can understand why people make that mistake, because you hear this word photosynthesis when you hear coral reefs, and that corals need to photosynthesize to survive. Actually,
Mm.
it's not the coral that photosynthesizes, it's the algae that's found inside their tissue. And just going back to that previous point, so yeah, corals are animals, but they are made up of like thousands of tiny little coral creatures called polyps. These
Mm.
are they basically look like upside down jellyfish. They have little tentacles that stick out. Their bodies are about 90% mouth. So they're voracious little eaters, and they basically capture food out of the water column. But this isn't their main food source. So going back to this symbiotic relationship they
Mhm.
have with algae, the algae photosynthesizes, and this produces food for corals. And so, yeah, they're a really unique, and it's an ancient relationship, but such a fascinating relationship in the animal kingdom. So, yeah, it can confuse people because it's quite a complicated relationship that they have.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
but
it's kind of like this endosymbiotic relationship between the algae, the plant, which inhabits the invertebrate, which is the coral. Technically speaking, the coral's an invertebrate that looks like an upside down jellyfish. Which I love this fact: 90% mouth,
yeah,
all
yeah.
mouth.
I love food, so if I could just dedicate 90% to just eating constantly would be the perfect life.
If you were to come back reincarnated as an animal, it'd either be a blue spotted ray or a
Yeah,
coral, a
absolutely.
coral polyp. 90%
Yeah.
mouth. You can eat as much as you want. So, sticking with the topic of
Mm,
coral. We know that coral is extremely important because it's a fantastic area, ecosystem for other marine life to inhabit and to gain protection from.
mhm.
But I think it was in 2016 we had this huge event. 50% of the Great Barrier Reef's coral reef was bleached. Can we touch on what coral bleaching is and how that affects the coral?
Yeah, so basically, in very simple terms, coral bleaching is just where the water gets too hot for the coral, it becomes stressed, and then it expels its algae. And in doing so, it loses one of its primary food sources because the algae
Mm.
produces food for it. And then they turn this ghostly white. because it's the algae that live inside their tissues that give them their color.
Right, I
And
see.
so the problem is that they lose a massive food source, but also losing this algae makes them more susceptible to disease. And quite often, but not all the time, bleaching will lead to death. And this is a big problem, like you mentioned. In 2016, there was a big bleaching event. We also had a consecutive one in 2017, and sadly, this December we also had the third mass bleaching event in 5 years on the Great Barrier Reef and other parts of the world. So this is becoming something that's happening more often, and this is a consequence of our lifestyles, and that we burn fossil fuels, which are producing a lot of carbon dioxide and pumping this into our atmosphere. And the reason why our oceans are in our tropical areas we experience it all over the ocean, but tropical areas are impacted highest. And the reason why we're experiencing this bleaching is because when there's more CO2 in the atmosphere, it blocks heat, it traps heat, and our ocean does us a fantastic favor in that it absorbs that heat. But this means that in the summer months, when you've got a lot of sunshine and naturally temperatures increase, it's just getting to those temperatures that the corals can't handle it. And it's like being in a really hot, stuffy room where you're sweating, except that imagine the sweating is you letting go of all of this algae, which is what produces food for you.
Right.
And unfortunately, this is happening so often now that coral reefs are just not able to keep up with this impact.
So it's our impact on the world as human beings, pumping all that CO2 that's causing
Yes.
the globe to warm up, the ocean temperatures to warm up, which that coral's not used to. The ecosystems like coral reef can recover. So are there any examples of this that you would say are success stories, or that give us a little bit of hope?
Absolutely. And this is, I think, why I love science and why I've pursued a career in it, is because, we are on the cutting edge of trying to solve issues like this. So there's a couple of things that people are doing right now. There's scientists I know in Australia that are basically trying to genetically breed heat resistant or heat tolerant corals, because even in these mass bleaching events where you get entire coral reef systems knocked out, we found that there's certain types that survive. And it's these corals that we're really fascinated by, because they could hold the key to us being able to rebuild reefs with coral species that are able to resist the temperatures that we're going to experience, or the increase that we're going to experience in the coming years. So this
So it's kind of like scientists are training these corals to be a bit more resistant to the heat.
it's more that they are already tolerant to it. And
Mm,
so they are just biologically able to resist it for one reason or another.
yeah.
And so scientists can take these corals and then grow them in labs and then take them to coral nurseries and then eventually repopulate entire reefs with resistant corals.
Nice. And I've heard of some other initiatives that are 3D printing kind of like coral substrates and leaving them at the bottom of the ocean.
Yes, so this is fascinating, and I think it's awesome. It's a fantastic example of science and innovation in one. And it's exactly as you say. It's basically scientists are making coral reef structures, and the reason they do this is because when a coral reef is bleached and a coral dies, it will start to break down. And the structure is really important not only for organisms that live there because it provides safety, but it's also super important for small little corals, so coral gametes, babies, to grow upon. And if you lose that structure, and it will eventually become sand, there isn't anywhere for them to grow. And so by creating these sort of 3D structures, they're giving them a substrate, something to settle upon and to grow,
Mm.
which is amazing. It's such a cool idea.
It's kind of like making a whole like building a city before people arrive,
Yes.
in a sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Building that, having that scaffolding for those polyps to then occupy and start growing and replicating.
Yeah.
Sounds like you have some really awesome adventures, Charlie, and it's been great to chat to you and find out a little bit more about what you do and talk about your passions, find out some cool facts
Yes, I
that
love that.
like
That's great.
corals and 90% mouth. Didn't know that. No idea. In terms of what's next for you, Charlie, I know that you teamed up with the Marine Conservation Society to start a project that's all about championing change for the oceans here in the UK.
Yes. So I guess this leads on nicely from, this whole conversation that we've had about, our impact on the world. Basically, I've decided, or I teamed up with the Marine Conservation Society, because if we're really going to truly combat threats in our oceans, we need to have sort of this local focus. And I've spent a lot of my time exploring the world and sometimes forgetting about the ocean on my doorstep. And so this summer, my plan was, before coronavirus hit, was to set off to circumnavigate the UK under my own steam. And that would be to raise awareness for our oceans, to show people in the UK that we have incredible marine wildlife here and that they don't have to travel halfway across the world to see it. And in doing so, I really wanted to nurture this passion and understanding, because, we can protect what's here. It's hard. It's very hard unless, you are a scientist and based somewhere else, or to have an impact on what's happening on the other side of the world. But you really can have an impact here. And so the campaign is called Saltwater Britain, but obviously, given the fact that coronavirus has hit now, things have changed. But what I'm looking to do now is to evolve with this crisis. And when we're able to, I'm going to be trying to get out and this summer at least do very small micro adventures around the coast to still raise awareness. But I will have to postpone my circumnavigation until next year. But I guess it just gives me more of a drive to do even more and do even better. And whilst also raising awareness, this is all about raising money for the Marine Conservation Society, a fantastic organisation that does brilliant work to protect the UK seas.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely keep an eye on that. And I think I've got a link to that in the description of this episode bio. So anybody that's listening or watching and you want to find out a bit more about sort of Saltwater Britain, you can check out that link, or you can head over to Charlie's Instagram page. Again, that is in the description of this episode. I'm just gonna have a quick look to see if we've got any other questions. Someone asked what the spots are for on the on the spotted rays. I think you said they potentially use it for not for communication, to say that I'm dangerous, don't eat me.
Yes, don't eat me.
Great. And final question from me, a really quick one. What's your advice for any budding Jackie Cousteaus out there, Jacques Cousteaus, that want to explore, want to become a marine underwater adventurer? What are some of the basic things they can do to get them on the right track?
Funnily enough, I think some of the most important things that I've gained in my career has been experience. And having a degree is important if you want to become a scientist, but the most valuable things is getting out there and getting skills and getting experience in the water. And we discussed this last time, but if you live in a place where you're able to go out and get some diving experience, that's fantastic. But also, you can go and practice skills in your local pool. Just getting used to being on the water is a skill in itself. And also spending time outdoors and in the ocean, then you start to hone in other skills like ID skills, practical technical diving skills and science skills. So there's lots of different things that you can do. But my number one bit of advice would be get out there, get involved with some citizen science projects in areas that you're interested in, volunteer, just try to get as many practical skills under your belt as possible, because that's what sort of sets you apart from the crowd. And through doing these practical skills, my time spent in Saudi Arabia diving every single day, I learned more than I ever did in a classroom. So I would say get out there, get your snorkel on, get your mask on, get your fins on, and go and explore your local patch.
There we go. Mask, snorkel, fins, kitchen sink. Go and explore your local patch. Charlie, it's been awesome chatting to you. Thank you so much. And again, if anybody wants to find out about Saltwater Britain or about Charlie's adventures, you can head down to the bottom of this, to the description of this episode, and you can find out a little bit more. So, Charlie, thanks for joining us, and I'll catch you a bit later.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Thanks, Charlie. Bye. I'll see you in a bit. Right, I've got to quit this Skype. Charlie, I'll chat to you in a bit.
Bye.
And that's brilliant. Well, thanks so much for everybody that thank you everybody that tuned in today. I hope you enjoyed getting to find out a little bit more about Charlie Young's adventures out in the ocean. Just have a click on one of her on the link to her Instagram page. God, I'm really tired. Is anybody else kind of losing? I swear that this lockdown situation's got me going cuckoo. But yeah, we're in it together. We're trying to stay creative and positive. That's the main thing. And stay at home, guys. Next up, who's going to be our next guest? On Friday at 11 a.m. we're going to be joined by Yusuf Rafik, aka the zoology guy. Anything to do with bugs, he loves. Most of you may have already seen him on his very own YouTube channel, show called Bug Face. I'm sure you can guess exactly what that involves. So until Friday, we're going to tune in then. Again, another reminder, if you're not already subscribed, please click the button down below, and why not drop me a comment whilst you're at it as well. So until Friday at 11 a.m, I will see you next time.